all of that being said, when you're in the lowest rungs of society's economic ladder, when you're in the lowest level there, automation was typically going to take your job.
And the world just opened up to me, and I started to realize that there's people that see me completely different than my hometown.
In this day and age, what we have to do is meet people in real life. You gotta meet people in real life. If you don't meet them in real life, that's technically not your friend.
If we're getting certain types of rejection, that can tell us whether we're headed in the right direction in life. Welcome to the Content Parlor. I'm your host, Chardell. Content Parlor is the conversation place for creatives, business owners, and marketers. We're here to celebrate creatives and showcase the Content Parlor studio, which we're in right now. The Content Parlor studio, we just want to make sure you know, it is available for rent, effective immediately. You can rent this very equipment that we're using to do this podcast today. Just go to stablegray.com/studio and book your appointment. I also want to highlight just some housekeeping things. To please go out, follow us on social media. We're on all the platforms under the handle Content Parlor. So at Content Parlor on YouTube and Content Parlor on all your favorite platforms. Got a special guest with us today. We're doing an exclusive for this individual, packed with knowledge, been doing a lot of grassroots effort in the community with over a decade, I would say lifetime. Over a decade of community impact. So we'll introduce him in just a second. One last thing I want to point out is that the Content Parlor has full linked episodes on YouTube. That's where you can find the full podcast. And you'll want to make sure that you hit the bell notification when you subscribe on YouTube, because that will give you the latest and greatest updates. That's how you get the first of the first from us. All right, with that out of the way, let me go ahead and hand the mic over to this gentleman to my right, your left. We go back a ways. It was really exciting to finally have a conversation with some microphones in front of us, because we've got some history there. But introduce yourself. What's your name? What do you do for a living now? And how can people stay in contact with you after the podcast?
Righteous. So I'm Leo Lewis. I'm born and raised in Omaha. And my skill set that I've learned over time is community organizing and community engagement strategy. And I'm also a visionary. So I like to not only create ideas, but manifest those ideas. And I help people get unstuck from a lot of things that they're going through, especially when it relates to the communal dynamic of just existing in the community and trying to figure out, how do we get more people engaged? How do we overcome challenges that we face as a community in general? So if you've ever been in an organization and they don't have a lot of engagement, or you've been around a situation that you feel like this is chronic in the community and you just want it to be solved, that's when people hit me up. So
yeah, that's real.
I found my talent over time through a lot of other endeavors, as you know.
Yeah, that's real. I appreciate that. I've always respect the courage that you've shown to go off and do what is necessary to make sure you're having an impact. There's nothing anybody can do but respect that.
Likewise. I mean, this dude he went out and sold Kirby vacuums. That's courage.
That's real. Well, cool. So yeah, we're here today following our series on relationships and mental health. Today in particular, we're talking about relationships, handling rejection, the hustle culture, and navigating modern dating. There's a lot that goes into that. There's a lot to unpack here today. So we're going to try to be as brief as we possibly can. But if we go deep, just stick with us. We're headed somewhere with this. So let's just start off with this topic from a high level of relationships as it relates to mental health. We were kind of talking off camera about these different things. What are you seeing right now in our community? You're talking about North Omaha, African Americans, whatever term, BIPOC, whatever you want to use. What are you seeing are some of the issues that people are dealing with when trying to navigate staying mentally well, mentally focused?
Just staying healthy in the mind in general?
Just overall.
Well, I'd start by saying that the current culture of America is going crazy in general. Our systems are breaking down, and a lot of people are finding it difficult to continue to exist in places where they know they've had to go along to get along for a long time. And now that reality is kind of settling in, and you can peek behind the curtains of how certain systems have been working. People are starting to make the hard decisions to say, you know what, this has never worked for me, and I can acknowledge that, and I want something different. However, we know we need certain systems to continue to function the way we have historically functioned. So we're in a shift right now, and that can really drive people kind of to a place where they feel that they're not stable anymore. And instability kind of is the breeding ground for, you know, having episodes where mental health becomes an issue.
So within that, do you think the major driver of that is a political thing? Do you think it's a social thing, or do you think it's just financial, just the financial pressures of middle class being spread so thin, and the wealth gap being increased? Is it something to do with that, or is it a bigger issue?
I actually would say it has a lot more to do with technological advances. Our ability to communicate as people has grown. So things that we couldn't talk about before, we can share that information in a heartbeat. So when we were kids, there was information we just didn't know until we got to a certain age. And our parents would sit us aside and say, you can't be in this room, or you can't have this conversation until you grown. And we were kind of isolated from that information. Now you got 3-year-olds who are watching children being born. So they don't ask where the babies come from no more. They go to TikTok. It's right there. So I think that type of advancing is causing the generations to look at each other and say, well, can I tell this young person something? And then you have young people who are saying, well, you can't tell me nothing because you're older. So I think that dynamic is really what's driving it, is the technological advances in communication among people and human beings. We're starting to see what other cultures do. Other cultures are starting to see what Americans do. And Americans have always had such a high esteem in the world that you see the spreading of the culture of America kind of just taking over the globe really rapidly in a way that it didn't before. So when it relates to the Black community, back to your previous question, I think that the Black community is still in the same place that it was socially in America as it was 40, 50, 60 years ago, maybe even hundreds of years ago, being the kind of, for lack of better terms, bastardized group based on how it's being presented to the world. And because of that, because of us being the underdogs, America celebrates the underdogs. So now the world celebrates the underdogs. So the underdogs become kind of the champions of the culture and moving things forward. And when we struggle, the world struggles. That's what I'm seeing, is that we tend to have some of the greatest struggles because we're at that lower level socially based on Americans' teaching, not in reality, but based on American teaching.
Yeah, I can feel that 100%, especially when over like the last couple of years, I've finally started to travel a little bit. I remember when I was quite a bit younger, you know, in high school and going into college, I never traveled until like my second or third year of college. And the world just opened up to me, and I started to realize that there's people that see me completely different than my hometown. There's parts of who I am that are valued when I never got celebrated for those things. So I definitely relate to that. As I travel more, I see that and get respect for things I thought were just, you know, nothing.
Yes. I had a conversation with a friend of mine who's a lady friend. We were working on a project together, and she said she needed a vacation. I said, yeah, you deserve a vacation. And we were just going back and forth about her taking her vacation. And one of the elements that came out of the conversation was sometimes we go on vacation just because we want to be seen. We literally can be in an environment that does not ever acknowledge who we fully are because we get pigeonholed into what people think we are. And so when we go on vacation, we can be among strangers, and a stranger will go, man, look at that shirt. I like them shoes, where nobody in your environment tells you that.
Yeah.
Because you appear to be different, so to speak. But the reality is you like, no, I was intentional about this shirt. I was intentional about my shoes. And here is a complete stranger recognizing and acknowledging how intentional I was and giving me that compliment. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Or, you know, the conversational points that you might have here, you know, you feel like an alien in your environment, where you go into another place and that's all they talk about. And so we go to other environments where people don't know us, oftentimes, in my opinion, as a self-check, just to see if we are the humans that we really want to be. Am I really a bad person, or is it just I've surrounded myself with a bunch of people who focus on the negatives because we're all in the same type of condition, or focus on the so-called positives because we're all in the same type of condition, where I can go to a new environment and they're going to judge me based off of what they first see. It's
Right.
going to be first impression. And if their first impression is I'm a great person, then that gives me a boosted confidence. And if their first impression is I'm not, then maybe I'm going to work on some things.
Yeah.
But going to those new places, I think, helps us out a lot.
Man, that's deep. I'm learning some things about myself as we're doing this podcast. Yeah, so I think as we continue to unpack this topic of self-identity, when we talk about relationships with other people, when we're trying to develop ourselves as a young adult or aspiring career person, it's becoming more polarizing and difficult to navigate those two spaces in particular, especially the self-identity. I see a lot of young people getting their identity from what they see on social media, and validating or confirming or rejecting certain things about themselves, good or bad, based on the comment section on a post that they saw. I think it's important that the general public understands that social media is first a business model. And Peyton talked about that on the last podcast. He talked about how this younger generation is completely lost if you tell them they need to unplug from social media. These are crazy concepts to me because I'm old enough, dating myself a little bit here, but I'm old enough to know a time when there wasn't an aspect of our life, social media. So I guess in your estimation, from the kids that you've worked with, your role as a father, different things like that, how do you recommend that people include social media in their personal identity or navigating their relationship to society?
So thanks for shouting out fatherhood, one of the best hoods. And when we talk about navigating social media, and I'm with you, I'm from a world where I have the luxury of knowing a world where social media didn't exist. And there's some pros and cons to it. The cons is the fact that we were ignorant to a lot of things that social media allows others to not be ignorant to, as we were talking about. However, it also exposes, especially younger people, to things that they probably shouldn't be exposed to at that age. We know that media impacts us on an emotional level. We also know if when you have an emotional reaction, your brain does not know the difference between what you're looking at on the screen and it happening to you in real life. The only difference is the physical impact of whatever that is you're watching. So if you're watching a scary movie and it makes you jump, your brain didn't know the difference. I remember one time I was trying to watch a movie while I was driving to stay awake, and I'm watching Transformers, which I should not have been watching Transformers, car movie. And so I'm driving down the interstate by myself, Transformers just playing on the screen in front of me, just trying to keep me awake, something playing in the background. And I look down at the screen while I'm driving, and there's a scene where the guy hurries up and hits the brakes, and the brake lights come on and flash in front of the camera. And I hit the brakes on the interstate.
Oh, wow.
Because I didn't know the difference psychologically, and I couldn't control that between my mind watching it on that screen and me looking at the road down the way and then seeing it out of my peripheral right over to the side. There's this image of this brake light, and I assume that it's a car in front of me.
Yeah.
Tripping. So when we talk about social media and you see a person, and it's so much more dangerous because we couldn't interact with the TV. We had a big floor model when I played Nintendo, and then we graduated to a TV that could sit on a stand that was a little smaller.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I couldn't tell that TV, that I liked this show. I couldn't tell that TV what my comments were about The Simpsons or whatever other episode I was watching. But in social media, somebody can make a piece of content and you can communicate with that content. And then the content can change based on your feedback.
Right.
So you can tell that person, hey, wear the red shirt next time you do another scene, and that person wears a red shirt. You're like, I influenced that.
Yeah.
And so there's this bi-directional relationship that can be very damaging, especially if the other person is not aware of the influence they have over the participant with that bi-directional relationship. Because if they're trying to just get clicks and likes, they might start doing things that might be not socially good for the person that's watching it. There's this concept called social contagion, and that's what's been taking place in our society, especially among the young people, that they have been having social contagions. For example, on TikTok, when the trend came out that people would put rubbing alcohol over their hands and then set it on fire and then just run around with fiery hands, that was a social contagion because it took like wildfire. Or the crate challenge, which they eventually banned from TikTok. People walking up the crates and then they fall off the crates and people were getting seriously injured.
Oh my goodness.
That was a social contagion. So I think we grew up in an era where we didn't have social contagion, where the only people we could look up to were vetted by industries who said, this is what people like, but this is also kind of the limit of where we're going to push the line. Now you have people who can blow up on their own and they can tap into that kind of primal instinct of us, but then they also can say, now that I've tapped into that, here I'm going to inject it with a little bit of what I want to inject it with. And that can be good or bad for society.
Sheesh, man. That's real. And you see that happening. I mean, it could be a good thing and a bad thing. You see the iceberg challenge, you know.
Oh, man.
Yeah, there's all kinds of these
challenges.
Mannequin challenge. Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, so I do think that this is a good moment to pause as we talk about relationships and just focus on the personal relationship, right? So we have this like virtual relationship with social media, but as we talk about personal relationships and developing those, what would you say are like, you know, just give people like one to two, maybe three pillars of like things they should be either looking for or be rooted in when it comes to like vetting friends, their social circle, and things like that. Because that's really how we navigate the world, right? It's like those closest 10 people to us really have the most influence over us.
Yeah, I think in this day and age, what we have to do is meet people in real life. Got to meet people in real life. If you don't meet them in real life, that's technically not your friend. Even though Facebook says this is your friend and they follow you on Instagram or they follow you on Snap or whatever, that person needs to meet you in real life and you need to meet them in real life. So I think that's number one. Secondly, I think you need to have experiences with people, real experiences, not like we went to a concert and you were on the other end of the room and I was on the other end of the room. I mean, we need to share an experience together. Hey, let's play basketball together. Let's go out and canoe together. Let's have an experience where your reactions and my reactions can vary, and then we can compare notes at the end of that experience. Those things I think are important. So meeting people in real life, having shared experience, and then from there, sharing goals. Sharing goals and actually saying, let's try to do this together. That's the way you can really vet friends. And then see if somebody's willing to tell you the truth. I think that's another thing that's missing here is we've gotten used to the idea of people not telling us the truth to our face because we want to keep everything in the like bubble or the feel good bubble. The world is a very hard place sometimes.
That's facts.
And so we don't want to hear negative things. And criticism can sound negative, but in reality, criticism is love. If somebody doesn't criticize you, then they might not love you in the way that you need to be loved in that moment. If somebody's willing to tell you, hey man, you got something on your face right here, that person cares about you.
Yeah.
The person that don't care about you, they walk around with that thing on your face and talk about you. So those are the ways I think we should be vetting relationships in this day and age.
I love it. I'm just trying to recap, meet people in real life, shared experiences, and then shared goals. Whew, man, that's some fire right there. Man, I love it. There's a lot that we could talk about with relationships. I want to get on to our subtopic here of handling rejection. All right, so when we talk about rejection, me and you, we both know that, you know, through the business world, through our personal relationships, it's a natural part of the process. And we go through cycles of it, right? But for those who are, number one, younger or who are trying to navigate some uncharted territory in their own personal life, what are, before we get into like pillars and things like that, what are some of the things that it's normal to deal with when it comes to rejection?
I would say foundationally, rejection is simply you and another person may not share the understanding of the values that you hold. It's very important to understand you and another person may not share the understanding of the values that you hold. You may not share values, that's true, but it's more likely that you don't share the understanding of the values. You don't want to be hurt. I don't want to be hurt.
Yeah.
We share a value of we don't want to be hurt. Now, how you understand not being hurt is different than how I understand not being hurt.
Yeah.
You could probably step on my foot and I'd be like, whatever.
Yeah.
But you got on a pair of 2 3s, DPs, I step on them.
Watch out.
I step on them. And it's a whole different story for you.
Right.
Because the way you value those particular shoes or value your appearance might be different than how I value my appearance. So somebody can step on my shoes and I ain't worried about it unless my foot is broken.
Yeah.
Where if a person says, you know what, I care about how my appearance is and how I grew up in an environment I was in, you step on my shoes, that means something totally different.
Right.
That's the difference between the two. And so just putting a precursor to it is we have to first look at rejection from that lens and say, okay, maybe I'm not being rejected. Maybe there's a misunderstanding in the values. And that's okay. We don't align.
Yeah.
And we just don't understand each other's values.
Okay. I like that. Sheesh. Like I said, man, I'm getting a little therapy session myself. So, let me straighten myself out. So that's a good one. I think I would add to that when it comes to handling rejection is that rejection points us in the right or wrong direction of like where we're at. It's like if we're getting certain types of rejection, that can tell us whether we're headed in the right direction in life. And I use rejection as a testing ground for my goals.
Okay.
Right? If I walk in the door, right? We talked about the Kirby and the door-to-door sales stuff that I did back in the day. Brutal. Don't recommend it. If you want to do it, you could do it, but I'm not recommending it. Although I did make some of those days, I made some pretty good money. I made like $400-$500 some of them days. But sometimes you walk in the door and you get a warm welcome. And that's like, oh, okay. Well, I might be able to sell something here. And other times you walk in that door and you got the box in your hand and you think you got something good to sell and you got your whole speech prepared. And they just immediately shut you down. They haven't heard a word you speak except for you're selling something. And in those particular situations, it's probably best to just get out of there.
Yeah.
And to my point, it's guiding me. It's showing me like where my sale is, where my opportunity is at. And so I believe that to some degree, rejection is a guide of like, if you're getting a lot of rejection from this group of people, and we're going to talk about dating in a second because this is part of it. If you're getting that rejection, that could be telling you that you're either in the wrong group, you're going about it the wrong way, or there's something about how you're doing it that needs to be enhanced, refined, or changed.
No, that's spot on. Because there's a saying going around and people need to take heed to it, which is find your tribe. That is a common phrase being used today.
I've heard that.
And people should accept that as true because that is true in this day and age. Now that we have this mass communication, we can interact with all these different people, you have access to find your tribe. And so being rejected in one tribe doesn't mean that you're not accepted in another tribe.
Yeah, that's real.
Find your tribe. It's very important that people do find their tribe because, like you said, and I agree with you. I just say I agree with you in that regard. I'm not going to go too much further because we can go down the path on that.
Yeah.
But yes, handling rejection. There's a book that I read recently. It's a very small book. It's called Go for No. And it was just saying go for no when you're actually trying to push something or sell something or introduce something to someone. Go for no. Actually go for getting the no and accept that. And then try to find out why there was a no. And as you continue to go for no, you will continue to get the path of what the yes actually looks like because you're going for the lesson that you're going to learn from the rejection.
Yeah.
And so there's a lesson in rejection.
That's good. Going back to social media, I just remember a meme or a post I saw from a girl recently. And she said that our perception of engagement, viewership, etc., is so polarized because we're always comparing ourselves to celebrities. It's like, oh wow, Kendrick Lamar got 19 million views, so my 3,000 isn't a lot. And so in the post that she made, she showed the size of a room of each size of audience. So in the beginning, she was like, here's what a room of 25 people looks like. Here's what 100 looks like. Here's 1,000. Here's 3,000. Here's selling out a whole stadium of 60,000. Just post the content. Don't worry about the rejection or not getting as many views or likes as Kendrick. Because if you could have 250 people that were really feeling your stuff show up and give you likes or post comments or whatever, that's a large room. Like most of us would be nervous to stand up in front of 250 people.
That's real.
So I think that puts things in perspective with when we talk about rejection and really like what are we measuring that on?
Yeah.
Like you said, it's your tribe isn't necessarily going to be 3 million people. But if you had a solid 25 people that really supported you, that might be all you need.
Yeah. Yeah. And if using Kendrick Lamar as an example, and even Andre 3000, he just did a recent interview. If you watched that interview with Andre 3000.
I did watch quite a bit of that.
Okay. And what he talked about was the Dungeon family and how they were actually, the reason why they called themselves Outclass, because they were the rejects. They had another rap group name.
Right.
Then they called themselves Outcast because they were the rejects of the rap scene. And then they went into their friend Rico Wade's mom's basement and they cultivated their skill set. He said, he used the analogy of Japan. He said, look at how Japan isolated itself away from the world after the bombings. And then it became like this superpower because Japan cultivated its skills and its talents and became more of a superpower. So finding their tribe as Japanese people or finding their tribe as the Dungeon family in the same thing. Every group gets together in small pockets. You don't have a whole huge fan base and they cultivate their skill set. They cultivate their values, cultivate their beliefs, and then they present those to the world and then the world reacts accordingly. And if the world reacts accordingly, great. And you can do that within yourself as well. Get to yourself, figure out your values, figure out your beliefs, and then present yourself to the world. And you will attract whatever tribe is for you. But social media cannot measure you. And that's one thing that people got to remember. Social media cannot measure you.
Yeah.
You are up against algorithm, a corporation that is involved in trading and ranking and trying to figure out what human beings think. And the machine doesn't always think like us.
Yeah.
And we're always the ones that's feeding the machine. And people got to remember that. So when you come up with something new, the machine might not even know what it is until the people have already voted on it.
Yeah, that's good. So yeah, to all the creatives out there, all the business owners, entrepreneurs, trust the process, man. Really trust the process and stay true to your ethos. Know what you're trying to do. And you influence the world. You don't allow the world to dictate what type of content or product that you're trying to put out. It's up to you. Beautiful. As we move on to the hustle culture, this is a great segue because we were just talking about, these different aspects of advancing and building a tribe. There's this whole culture in the United States centered around social media posts, content style or lifestyle, work-life balance, all of these different things that people are trying to put this perfect spaghetti mix together to make their life perfect. The older I get, the more I realize that there's literally no such thing as a perfect life for anybody. Like the richest people that I've ever been around struggle just as much as anybody that I've seen that's poor. And some prominent, notable figures. I mean, you see the way Elon Musk just laid off an entire department. That you wouldn't hire all those people if the plan was to fire all of those people later.
Right.
He's going through struggles. He's going through struggles.
That's true.
This hustle culture, what do you make of it, first of all? I'll just stop there. What do you make of this hustle culture?
Dude, there's a lot to talk about. I'm trying to figure out how deep down the rabbit hole do we want to go in this. And so I'm gonna drop a nugget and I'm gonna move away from it because it's a deep hole. There's a economist, he's kind of an economist, but more so he looks at the way society is moving. His name is Jeremy Rifkin. He wrote a book called The End of Work. And Jeremy Rifkin's The End of Work, he talked about how automation will displace workers, and specifically it will start with the Black community, which is how I got introduced to Jeremy Rifkin's work through a good brother of mine who said, you need to check this out. And Jeremy Rifkin borrowed from a Black man named Sidney Wilhelm, who wrote a book called Who Needs the Negro? And in this book, he talks about how automation will displace low-wage paying jobs. And those jobs are the jobs that typically were given to Black folks as they migrated from the South North, because we were used as strike breakers back in the day, post so-called slavery in the early 1900s. And so with all of that being said, when you're in the lowest rungs of society's economic ladder, when you're at the lowest level there, automation was typically going to take your job. What's interesting is how AI came after the programmers first. So the programmers programmed AI, and then AI came after the programmers. And how that happened is programmers were like, we need to make code that can help us make code so we can have a check and balance against our code. And so they did that. And then they created this AI, and they started checking their code, and they started using AI to check the code, and the machine was supposed to learn the code so it can get better at the code. And then programmers started realizing that, no, this AI could take our coding jobs first. And so these were, you're talking about Silicon Valley, we're talking about the upper, we're talking about in the 10 percentile of income ranges in society, the top 10 percentile, programmers, people in Silicon Valley. And so how does that all relate to what we're talking about here? Is that hustle culture is when people are trying to survive. That's how it continues to perpetuate. And people are trying to survive by almost any means necessary. And so when you look at a thing like Uber, which borrowed its model from Jitney service, which was a Black-led movement,
across the country.
Across the country, when Black folks got cars and started saying, I need to make extra money with this asset that I have, so I'm gonna offer cheap rides. Then they created the cab service to license that process, and then locked out Black folks. It's like, it's interesting because I always say, when the state goes broke, it takes Black people hustles.
Wow.
And so when you look at marijuana being legalized
Oh my gosh.
in states, when you look at the lottery came from the policy, or aka numbers racket, which what Malcom X used to do, run numbers. I will get numbers from people, correct, and then you win the number, and then you get the money.
Yep.
The state adopted that too. So
shout out Carl Washington, man. Shout out CW Boxing Club.
Right. So I would say that hustle culture is inevitable now, because there is the wealth gap that is taking place tremendously, and the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, and they know that. Everybody feels it, and people are trying to survive. So now we're all gigging, Instacarting, door dashing, taking a side job. I went to Barnes & Noble recently, and I'm gonna stop talking here, but I went to Barnes & Noble recently. And there's a whole section where it normally says economics and business. There's a whole row of books that says side hustles, side hustles, side hustles, side hustles.
Wow.
And I'm like, dude, I remember the word side hustle was only something the rappers used to use.
Right.
Cassidy, Rick Ross.
Yeah.
T.I., Hustle Man. Like hustling
was like a slang word.
Was a slang word typically that revolved around the Black community often, but now it is common everyday language and used in standard English vernacular among the masses of Americans. Side hustles got TV shows, it got podcasts, YouTubes. Your wealthiest individuals are on news shows telling regular civilians that they should look for side hustles.
Wow.
So when I look at hustle culture is the product of what we see happening in this society. As our economy continues to change, it's only going to get worse.
Yeah. Man. Yeah, there is a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
And you hit on some topics that I hadn't even considered yet. So I appreciate that. The hustle culture, I think on social media in particular, is presented as this like pie in the sky thing to attain. And the thing that really agitates me about this rhetoric of hustle culture is that we live to work. That's the dangerous part about it. And there's also this concept or this idea that if we just apply enough energy for a short amount of time, then we can live the rest of our lives in this utopian euphoria. And it's just a huge cap. Like the best lifestyle that I've ever lived and that I've ever known anybody to live is one where they are chasing down their goals. That's the best one.
Yeah. Right
That's
on.
when you're the most fulfilled. That's when your relationships are the most enriched. And that's when you're, I'm very careful not to say happy, but would say in a state of not feeling like you need to be doing something else. You feel like you're doing what you're supposed to be doing with
Right on.
yourself.
Right on.
And we see that play out in some really bizarre different ways, right? Like you see like Louis Farrakhan, you see who's the guy in Africa that I'm thinking of? There's been several. People incarcerated over this stuff, and they feel like, you know what, this is where I'm supposed to be in jail, holding down my principles.
That's real. That's real.
So I think the big deception with the hustle culture is that there is something that you're supposed to go out there and attain, and once you have it, then life is good.
Yep.
That's just not how life works.
That's true. That's true. No, living your purpose is the most important thing. That's true.
Yeah. Good. So yeah, that kind of looks at the role of like work-life balance. But then you talk about dating. This is a major thing. Now, we're not a dating podcast, all right? So we're gonna keep it PG. But dating is certainly an aspect of relationships and mental health that's impacting a lot of people.
Yeah.
When we look at the United States, there's all these different dating podcasts, right? There's people, toxic ones. You got people bashing women. You got women bashing men. You've got people who identify as all different types of things with a whole spectrum of opinions.
Yeah.
We're not here to get into that. This is more of a conversation about how it affects your mental health, right? Who you select as a partner, and I would say even more than that, the long-term effect of the partner selection and how that plays out when it comes to fulfilling our life goals. So I know that you're married.
Yes.
And have been married for a while now. It's got to be
19 years.
Yeah. Okay. Well, congratulations, first of all. That's got to be a record in today's age. People be in and out, boy.
Yes, sir.
So yeah, I guess first of all, like, what's it like for those out there who are not married? What's it like being married? What's it like achieving your goals in life and your mental health when it comes to marriage?
It's a commitment, number one. Marriage is a commitment. That's all it is. It's a commitment and a desire to make it continue to work. But the making it work part is often talked about. But the reality of it is you should know early in the game if this person can walk life with you or not. If you don't know that, then I think that you probably should look around, honestly. Because if you know that you can walk life with this person and they can accept you for who you are and you can accept them for who they are, ups and downs, then it's going to work. And that's how I feel, and that's how I felt when we started, and that's how I'm still feeling to this day.
Nice.
So what's it like is, it's like, to me, it's so normal. I don't have any major description for it because it's just so normal. When I met my wife, my phone used to blow up, as you know, with all of these people who needed things in community, and I had business going on, music, all of this other stuff. And my time was always divided. But in that time period, I explained to her when we first met that this is probably not going to change. I know this is a part of who I am. And she accepted that and said, okay, which allows me to this day to do a lot of the community work that I do, because from the very beginning, I was honest with her about something that I understood about myself. But had I not taken the time to fast, reflect, get more into myself, I wouldn't even have had that level of honesty with myself to say, this is probably never going to change. So I say, just even in starting relationships, outside of my particular marriage, in starting relationships, I don't think people take enough time to spend by themselves, to themselves, and get to know themselves, to be honest with another person, to tell them who they are.
Yeah.
And then the other person, they use them as their vetting stick to figure out who they are. And you shouldn't do that. It's the opposite. You're putting too much of a burden on a new person that you just met to tell you who you are.
Yeah.
You should be able to show them who you are and tell them who you are because you are aware and self-aware. And I'm not talking about in an egotistical way. I'm talking about in the most humble, most humility-having way you possibly can to say, you know what, I know this about me, good and bad, and this is just who I am right now. Are you willing to accept it?
Yeah.
And that person can say yes to that truth, man, you got a good foundation.
Yeah, that's good. Those are some key notes for y'all out there. Always, always, always start with self first when you're vetting your mate, whether you're in a relationship or not, right? Because those happen in seasons as well. But if you're not centered, I can tell you from my experience, if you're not centered, it's almost surely going to fail. Good luck. I mean, congrats if it does still work out for you, but for most of us, that's not going to happen. Like, there's a reason why I'm still on the market, you know, 'cause I wasn't honest about myself back in the day, which I am now, though.
Right.
So in terms of the dating scene that you're seeing in our culture, do you think that that's having an effect on people's mental health and their self-worth? And what are you seeing right now?
Yeah, it goes back to what you talked about earlier, especially with the advent of social media. We're talking about a lot of comparison now. Where back then we can only compare ourselves to the people we saw in the world, like actually saw at the club or saw at a specific event or saw at a place. Now you compare yourself to images on social media, on the internet, with filters and all kinds of other things.
With filters.
And so we got people comparing themselves all the time. Now when they're dating, they're comparing their relationship to what they saw on social media. I think it's really hard right now. And I think that for another generation coming up that's going to get into this, they should take the time and get away from all that social media stuff. And again, you have to figure out who you are. And then when you're dating somebody, quote, dating somebody, see if they're willing to sacrifice. See if they're willing to be honest with you. I just told a group of young people last week, because me and my lady did a presentation for about 150 teens, and they were asking about relationships. And the advice that we gave them was, tell that person the hardest truth you possibly can in the beginning and see if they stay. The hardest truth about yourself in the beginning. You know what, man, I'm chronically broke. I never keep a job. Like, be as honest as you possibly can and see if that person stays. And if that person says, you know what, I'm okay with that. I'm still trying to, do some things for myself. Then you got a foundation to go on, because it started with truth.
Yeah.
Whatever that hard truth is, because what you don't want is for somebody to judge you later on because you put on all of the mask of putting on your best self, and really your best self is how you get through the day.
Yeah.
When people go on dates, they get all dressed up, get all fancy, but the reality is that's not how you are probably 7 days out of the week. So I recommend you show up to that first date the same way you show up everywhere else, 7 days a week, because that's what a person got to deal with every single day.
Yeah.
So be that person. And then when you get super dressed up, when y'all together, then it's even that much more icing on the cake because y'all together and you get to look good.
Yeah, that's dope. That's real talk, man. I think also too with that is when you have that honesty in the beginning of the relationship, it saves you time later in the relationship. And that's something that you were kind of talking about, is this concept of investing time in the wrong people. We do that a lot in not only our dating relationships, but also in our personal relationships, because we think we know the outcome that we want and how that's supposed to look. We don't take the time to actually like be real and upfront. And I will say too, when you talk about just relationships in general, the same rules apply to business. I've gone through these same types of processes with my business partner, and we presented ourselves a certain way when we first met. And it's like, oh, okay, we're going to, And then you learn later on, this person has some things about themselves that are different than yours. And that's okay. But, luckily we were blessed to meet each other as high character individuals, and we're able to navigate that and get through it successfully. But that's a big part of our success is those come to Jesus moments when you realize, oh, this person really don't agree with me on this point. So now what? And those things are very similar to dating relationships. So I'd say, I guess the point that I'm trying to make is a lot of the things that you navigate in a personal relationship are also things that will those soft skills will translate to you as a professional. And so take those notes and learn those lessons as quickly and as early as possible. I wish I had these lessons when I was 21. Sheesh, man. Where I would be right now.
Same here, same here.
Yeah, so that's going to do it for this episode. We've had an amazing discussion just about the basics of mental health as it relates to relationships, handling rejection, and navigating the modern dating scene. Please take the information that you've heard today and apply it as best you can. If you have any questions or comments, please put that in the comments below, or you can email us at nerds@contentparlor.com. And we will see you guys in the next episode. Any final remarks or comments you want to make? Always want to give people that chance.
Oh yeah, just love yourself, love your community. I'm Leo. You can find me online, Leo Lewis II. Visionary Line.
There we go. It's that simple. All right, guys and girls, we'll see you in the next episode. Peace.